Hello and welcome to the Montresor Legal General Counselling podcast. I'm the guest host this week, Sam Davenport. I'm the senior consultant in the Commerce and Industry team where I focus on interim assignments. I'm here with my colleague, Managing Director Josh Blake, and our guest this week is Tom Bohills, founder of Founders Law. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Hello chaps, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you on.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. Thanks for that. And what we're going to be doing today is sort of going through your background, the conception of Founders Law, and then some wider pieces on the interim and ALSP market and the growth of that and the change of that in 2024. So, let's get started. Tell us a little bit about your kind of journey up to the conception of Founders Law, and then how things have changed for you over the last few years.
Journey, love it. Okay, here's my story. So, I was originally at White & Case. So I took a very traditional route to start with, which was sort of big law in its true sense. So qualified into White & Case, kind of the IT team. Did that for about a year post-qualification, and then got quite an amazing offer to move in-house to what was then a Future 50 fintech company. Got a lot of grief about moving in-house that early in my career. A lot of people said, it's what you do when you're about to retire, or the in-house market back then had a bit of a negative reputation for being quite slow-paced.
And partners will say anything to keep you there as well.
Yeah, there was I got a lot of grief on that, so it was quite a punchy thing to do to go in-house at one PQE then. Went to this awesome tech company. They're called Alchemy. Joined them when they were sort of 30, 40 people. They scaled to about 200. They opened up 10 offices, went to the Series B. It was like the classic roller coaster of like huge growth. We even had like a bell in the office every time you signed a deal. It was a classic. For me, coming from White & Case, I was like, this is super exciting.
I'm still trying to get that implemented.
Yeah, with ping pong table as well. So that was an amazing journey because they had this incredible explosive growth, and then it was like the classic tech story of funding started running a little bit dry, US offering wasn't really taking off, founders started falling out, and it just was like absolute chaos after that. So we rode the highs and then did the lows of redundancies, restructuring, office closing. But the reality was, coming from like a private practice background, I loved it. It was great. It was chaos, but I loved it. So I went from there to another tech company, lot more relaxed, kind of. It was spun out of a hedge fund, so it never had funding issues, let's put it that way. And I sort of realised when I was there, I got about 6 months in, set everything up, and then thought, they don't actually need me 5 days a week. In fact, they probably don't even need me 4, they probably need me like 2 days a week. So I actually sat down with them and said, look guys, you need a GC, and it's important for you and your sort of procedures of business to have someone in-house, but you don't need to be paying me 5 days a week. And that was kind of weirdly, I want to say there was this big like eureka moment. There wasn't really. It just sort of happened that at the same time as I was scaling down there to sort of 2-3 days a week, because of the nature of fintech and how kind of what's the right word for this?
Other than incestuous.
Other than incestuous. That was the word I was going for. I was like, can you bleep that out or something?
I think that's okay. No, we know the context.
Yeah, fintech particularly back then, this was sort of 14 to 16, very incestuous. Everyone knew each other. Obviously people would move around, heads of sales, tech people would move around, so you end up with a really amazing network. And people just kept coming to me and saying, look mate, I'm now head of sales here, can you just take a look at this contract really quickly? So as I was scaling down at the tech company that I was GC at, I was also getting a lot of requests from people just to say, can you just do a little bit on the side for us? And it was sort of born from that. It became a business just almost by accident.
Almost like a snowball effect where one brings the next.
Yeah, and it was, like I said, a lot of people when they start a business, they say they've had this great idea, or they sit at the kitchen table and they map it all out, and then they go for it. It wasn't like a brave decision or anything where I just plunged in. It was like an incremental. I just got pulled into it, and then just realised there was this whopping great hole in the market. Particularly in terms of, well, I was going to say pre-Series B, pre-Series A, pre-Series B tech companies, where the market back then, and it's got a lot better, which I'm sure we can talk about in terms of offerings. If you're a founder, you've taken a bit of capital, you're in growth mode. For the legal side of things, you basically had two options. You either go to, and I'm not going to knock them because there are lots of amazing firms out there. You go to a super expensive city firm, obviously highly priced. Usually you're given a junior, and pushed around because you're sort of at the smaller end of their client segment.
Not a priority in that case.
Not a priority.
Well, in case you're probably getting charged out at a similar amount to what a senior lawyer that you now have at
100%.
Founders would be doing, so it's just not cost effective, really.
I can tell you now that there is no lawyer in the firm who bills out at what I was billing out as an NQ at White and Case in 2015. So I think that gives you an indication of where it's moved. But anyway, summary is you had your private practice lawyers. They're great for a lot of things, but a lot of them didn't really get tech either and weren't very business savvy, particularly when companies were growing and willing to take more risk. Or you had your in-house lawyer, which again, awesome thing to do when you're in a sort of particular position where you've got enough volume. But for these early stage companies, they just don't need them. And they're expensive, as you guys know. So yeah, we fitted into that model of we're like your in-house counsel, embedded on your emails, on your Slack channels, but you can turn us on and off. So I can give you a full spiel later on, but generally that's how we started. I was a sole practitioner. We're now about 25. So it has been a good growth story despite the kind of economic headwinds.
Really good, yeah. And I think it's difficult to start a business, to run a business, especially law firms, heavily regulated and things like that. In some instances, it hasn't worked out so well, and sometimes that's been quite cruelly sort of targeted on things like LinkedIn and other social media. What's the secret to kind of taking it from inception to where you are now without having those kinds of issues?
There is an element of luck. I divide it into three. There's luck. Okay, there's no control over that. You can just get lucky. I got lucky going to a fintech when fintech was booming. You become a very hot asset because you just happen to be in the right space. So there's a lot of luck. The second bit I would say is getting good anchor clients. So having clients who support you early, stick with you, grow with you, you kind of, in a software sense, you kind of almost like iterate together. You're sort of trying it out together. Does this kind of service offering work? Does this work for you? How would you tinker with it? So we had some really supportive clients. And the third bit, and this is a good segue to recruitment, key people. Like, that is everything. Because as a sole founder, it's a hell of a lot of pressure and responsibility. Yeah. You've got no one to talk to. Every decision's made by you. Every mistake you have to own. So the most important thing for me was, and we've done a lot of this, last year was, really big on this for me, bringing in a key team who I trust. And honestly, that's been pretty transformational. So yeah, those would be my key bits, I think.
Awesome, great advice.
So that kind of leads us on nicely to the next question I wanted to ask you, was just a bit more detail around the kind of like concept and the model of the firm and how that's changed over time. Because I know, as you mentioned there, that you've scaled quite quickly in terms of the year-on-year growth of headcount since conception. But was there, I suppose, a time where you shifted your focus from having that kind of key core group where it was people you trusted who could work independently to that more kind of team structure and moving towards that more slightly traditional law firm structure that we see now in the firm?
Yeah, so we actually tinkered around at the beginning with a kind of keystone style model. So when I basically got to the stage as a sole practitioner, I was like, oh God, I'm busy. I need someone to come and help. The first thing I did was I went out and engaged with a consultant. And it was the classic model of, revenue split.
Eat what you killed.
Yeah, eat what you kill kind of thing. And I would feed him and then we ended up with 2, 3, 4 of them. I think the problem we had with that was our model is we're not project based. We're not like, do this contract, off it goes, and then, we speak to the client in 6 months. It's like very heavy on the like relationship, everyday advice. I don't want to call it churn because it's much more than that, but it's like volume heavy work. So we found that consultants they can sometimes be looking for the next thing, and they weren't necessarily willing and ready to commit to the client in a way that allowed us to build up that relationship. So I had to take the plunge a little bit and basically start hiring full-time employees, which as an early stage business is quite scary.
It's a lot of fixed cost.
It's a hell of a lot of fixed cost. You've also suddenly got you've got to start considering things like benefits and pensions and all these things which you hadn't even thought about before. You've suddenly got to start setting up. So to answer your question, I guess, we went from what was originally a kind of fractional general counsel, one client, one person, Keystone lawyers on demand style model, to what we now call a pod. So it's like an in-house as a service. So each client, when they come into us, we'll take a look at them, we'll understand what sector they're in, we'll usually do a bit of an audit on them to work out what stage they're at. Are their legals actually any good? Do they need a lot of help, or they just need things to keep the ship sailing in the right course? So we'll do this audit, and then we'll pick them a team. So we'll basically give them a senior lawyer, usually 2 associates and a junior. That then becomes their team, and that stays with them throughout the whole journey. That team will predominantly be sort of commercial tech lawyers, but we've also now got a couple of other teams who we can slot in whenever it's needed. So we've got employment, IP, corporate funding, just hired a data privacy person, and the model is team slots in. They might be on 10 hours a week, they might be on 80 hours a month, and we can slice and dice the models in all different kinds of ways. We even take equity sometimes. And essentially what they do is they then work with the client consistently. Like I said, they're on their email addresses if they want them to be. We use Slack, we use WhatsApp. Again, there's probably some regulatory issues around that, but anyway, let's
ask Boris if you should use WhatsApp.
Yes, I was going to say, it's good enough for the PM, it's good enough for me. So yeah, cut a long story short, we have this pod. It moves with the client all the way through their life cycle. If they keep expanding, we can add more team members in. And the quite nice thing is these additional service offerings. So as an in-house lawyer, speaking as having been one myself, you do have a skill set. You're a commercial lawyer and you sort of chance your arm at lots of different things. But I think the reality is, if you get a really sticky employment matter or a corporate matter, you need to bring in external counsel. What we can do is this pod moves along with the client, and whenever they've got anything particularly knotty or specific, like regulation, we bring in another member of the team, exactly the same price point, bang, in they go, work with the client, and then off they go again, and the central team carries on. So that's the model. I think it's been pretty successful. There's definitely, really? And I'm sure we can get onto this, there's a lot of copycats up now. It's both flattering and hideous, but there we go.
I suppose on that kind of longer term journey that you mentioned, anchor clients and wanting to have that pod follow the team as they go through, maybe that's also contributed to wanting to give that type of plugged in service as in-house. Kind of makes consultants less suitable because they're project based, it's not a familiar face, they're going to move on. I think it would be hard to sell the service in that way if you are sort of then maybe offering the service and then trying to bring people into doing it. It's that you almost have to give that sort of longer term view. I think it makes sense to focus on that. But you mentioned there kind of the benefits to the clients in terms of the structure that's there. How does something like this benefit the associates and the lawyers that you actually employ to do that? How does it sort of, I suppose, develop their careers or give a benefit in a different way to being an in-house counsel for one place or staying in that kind of big law type firm that you started in?
Okay, so this is actually a big sort of pitch we have to people who are joining us.
Now's the time.
Now here it is. Yeah, come on, all right.
Into the camera.
So there are great things, as we were saying, about being private practice and being in-house, and we are not set out to try and take on either of those models. They've both got huge amounts of benefit to clients in specific circumstances. I think there are also lots of bad bits about them. So if you're in private practice, you are generally forced to just churn with not very much commercial context. So we always used to sort of joke at White & Case about throwing advice over the wall. Contract comes in, SaaS contract, okay, you review it, you sort of know what you're looking for, bang, goes over the wall and off it goes. And I find that as an associate so frustrating to think, well, what happened to it? Was it good? Did the product work? Did you ever actually use those SLAs that we negotiated for ages? So I think the problem with private practice for me was, yes, the hours are extremely demanding. I feel like you do also get treated a little bit more like a service provider. There's not always that really nice kind of relationship between client and lawyer. And there's just no commercial... I shouldn't say there's no commerciality. There's lots of very good commercial private practice lawyers out there, but you don't really get to understand the business you're working with. You know, you just face off against one person. You don't know the whole team. You don't know the business, life cycle, founders. Likewise with in-house, you know, yes, you in theory get a better pace of life, but you're also dealing with the same product, the same people, the same contract over and over and over and over again.
Unless you move, So
unless you move, which is why you've got this, which is great for you guys. Every 2 years,
true,
you're sort of, and that's just the way it works, and that's the acceptance of being an in-house lawyer, is you jump around a bit to sort of keep progressing. And the other bad thing about being an in-house lawyer is, as I was saying about my earlier company, you are shackled to that company. So you can be the most top-class lawyer out there, but if the company's failing, you're tied to the ship as it goes down. So what we say to associates who are joining us is, you get all the awesome bits of private practice. You get the like fast-paced stuff, all different practice areas. You get to work on multiple clients. You get to run relationships, but you get all the nice in-house stuff as well, which is you sit in on board meetings, you go to product demos, you actually form genuine relationships with the clients. Like, they become sort of mates, and we go to their Christmas parties, and you properly understand the product. So it's kind of, for associates, it's the perfect, and for all lawyers actually who join us, it's the perfect hybrid of all the good bits squished together, and the hours are actually pretty cushy. I mean, I think I'm always telling the team, it's like, you have it good, I promise. I think the highest billing associate in the whhole firm last year did just under 1,300 hours.
There you go.
So yeah.
Obviously, that's something that's when you're sort of looking to make hires, going to be very attractive. But there's sort of things outside of the work at Founders that I think is also attractive, like things that you mentioned to me, like the flexible working, the remoteness, and the kind of empowerment for the people you hire to make their own choice as individuals, rather than there being a sort of overarching flexible policy. So tell us a bit more about that, as I know there's been a few kind of areas that you've not targeted but made sure to get caught into that, to give you the ability to hire some people that are fantastic at what they do, but at the same time maybe wouldn't have been given the opportunity to thrive in a more fixed and rigid environment.
Yeah, we've got some quite unusual, and I mean that in the loveliest possible way. We've got some really unusual people at the firm, lots of non-traditional career paths. Obviously, you've very kindly placed a couple with us, Sam.
Here and there, over the years,
Yeah, so we are sort of unique in a few ways, I guess. The remote thing, I started rather during COVID, or just before COVID. So it was a sort of a no-brainer to set up as a kind of remote general counsel. And then actually we had a very weird circumstance where we scaled during COVID. Obviously had the great funding climate of 21 and 22, which was fabulous. And then when we came out of COVID, I sort of thought, okay, we are always going to be fully remote, and we're going to have people up north, and we're going to have people in the southwest, and we had someone working from Denmark, and actually the juniors came to me and said, I've been working on my ironing board for 2 years. Please God, can we have an office? So we've now got this situation where there is absolutely no compulsion to ever come into the office, and some people don't. But we've got a really nice space. People come in for socials. People just come in just to hang out with each other. So we're sort of hybrid, without any requirement to ever come in if you don't want to. In terms of the non-traditional career path thing, I think we do ask the lawyers to do quite a lot. We require a very unusual type of person, because lawyers generally are risk averse, and particularly if you've gone through private practice, you have been brought up to be told spot risk, find every risk. If you miss a risk, it's a liability for the firm. So you end up with giving advice to clients, basically saying, here's this contract and here's all these horrendous things that are wrong with it. And by the way, I'm not making any decisions on it. I'm just telling you what the risks are.
And then it goes over the fence. Yeah,
over the wall. Yeah, over the wall. So what we try and ask the lawyers to do is, obviously they've got to be great technical lawyers. They've got to be like nice, and normal, and founders can't feel intimidated by them. We don't do all the legal sort of jargon piece. You talk to people as humans. So they've got to be great technical lawyers, really nice, not risk averse, which I know sounds weird, but they've got to be able to sit down with a founder or a founding team and say, here are 6 issues with the contract. Honestly, these 2 you don't really need to worry about. If we can win them, great. Mm-hmm. These 2 you do need to be worried about. But we always say to the lawyers, never say no to a client. Always say no, but. Don't do that, but do this. You can't don't be the blocker who turns around and says, don't do that. So yeah, we ask our lawyers to be entrepreneurial, really nice, great technical lawyers. It's difficult to find those kind of people because often you get people who are bits of some and not the others.
Yeah, we quite often, when we're working on a senior legal role, like a GC role, they've had someone in situ before from Latham, Kirkland, they said that fantastic technical lawyer, but everything comes back covered in red. Yeah, everything's no, you can't do that. And actually finding those entrepreneurial people is really the key factor. So I think that will resonate with a lot of in-house teams. Yeah,
you just say we are really keen to say to them, I know it's hard because you're the lawyer and you've been told your whole life that's for the business, but you're part of that business now. They trust you, they're leaning on you, and part of our service offering is to try and make a decision for the clients. So ultimately the founder or the C-suite team will actually sign off on the decision, but the reason they're instructing lawyers is not to be told, oh, this is really scary. It's to be told, okay, well, we're mitigating it here, here and here, and based on the hundreds of other times I've done this before, I think this is the sensible route to go. Do you agree? Yeah. And I think finding lawyers who are willing to do that and can do it in a sympathetic and unintimidating way is actually really difficult.
Yeah, and just another point on candidate attraction, actually. Sam mentioned the flexible working. You also have a bit of a different kind of remuneration scheme. Yeah. Are you able to share a bit of information?
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, of course. So I'm going to say that sort of really horrible thing that you see on LinkedIn. It's we offer a competitive package, but yeah, I think the base is, our base generally is quite competitive given what I've talked about in terms of the expectations of billables and the fact we're fully remote and stuff. We also, for associates, we have what's called profit share. Mm-hmm. So we don't have billable hours targets. Mm-hmm. I don't like that. I think it's, as a business owner, I would love to have it in place, but I don't think it's the kind of thing that's attractive to people. And it's also such a blunt tool. So what we do instead is we have each associate has a dashboard, and we want to treat them like grown-ups. We want to say to them, this is what you cost the firm every month. So you've got full visibility over what your cost is, your salary, your NI, all your OPEX and the back office team. Here's your line. The only thing we ask of you is try not to consistently be below the line. And then associates are motivated to try and achieve different thresholds. So it's almost like a sales team.
It's very similar to a recruitment model in that sense with the
is it?
Heads. Yeah, very similar to how we structure things, yeah.
And it's ultimately their choice. We have some members of the team, like I said, who've come from non-traditional pathways, who are parents to kids, and they're very happy just being within their first tier. They don't want to stretch. Yeah. We're happy, they're happy. Then you've got particularly some of the youngsters who are chasing a housing deposit, who know that if they move through these certain thresholds, they get what's called profit share. So every quarter, they get paid out quite a decent chunk, actually, of the profit they make the firm. Nice. So it just helps them to be a little bit more aware of business cost and OPEX and how business works, but also it allows them to kind of set their own goals, I guess.
I think it's really meritocratic too. Yeah. It literally depends on how hard you work. Your output you get rewarded for, rather than sometimes in a law firm someone will sit in a corporate team and be doing all-nighters constantly. Someone will be sat in real estate and they're on the same banding. So actually doing it by output is a very fair way.
I think so. And there's also I mean, I think one of the other things you've got to be conscious of is there's revenue, there's sort of billable time on the clock, and then there's actually what's billed. And this is the other thing. We want to make them aware that just because they're sticking something down on a clock, it's not necessarily going to flow through to the client. And we're trying to build good behaviour, which is, if you stick a load of time on the clock and the client says, what the hell is that? It gets written off. There's no profit there, so you don't get that. So it encourages that behaviour to say, record your time based on the value you've added, because if the client doesn't pay it, you don't get it in your profit share.
Yeah.
So it just develops that good ethical behaviour of, okay, was that worth what I did? And therefore you get much less pushback from clients. They're happy with the quality of the work. Hopefully a kind of virtuous cycle.
Yeah, it's quite empowering in a sense. It gives people ownership of their pods and the areas that they work in as well.
Yep, that's the hope.
And one thing I wanted to ask you as well is, obviously we've talked a lot about kind of like how founders started and how you've then sort of brought in maybe more junior lawyers each time to set up these pods. You've also dipped your toe into the kind of trainees area as well. So how have you found that side of things?
It's been good. I feel so sorry for junior lawyers these days. Genuinely, it's really hard. Okay, Gen Z have a bad rap, and there's some merit to that in terms of their level of expectation. But by the same token, it's a hyper competitive market. I mean, hyper competitive. I think there is an increasing worry that firms are going to stop training juniors. Because they're just going to rely on automation, automated solutions, AI, etc., etc. It is a big investment. I mean, speaking quite transparently, our juniors are not big profit generators for the firm. Our really juniors are trainee lawyers, partially because they're not incentivised to be, and they're sort of dragged between different teams to get as much experience as possible. I've loved doing it. It is a pretty amazing moment, actually. We've had our first people start to qualify. So we had a girl who joined, she was number 5 through the door. Wow. She's just qualified with us, junior associate, absolute rock star. But it's hard. It takes a huge amount of investment, and particularly when you've got lawyers who are incentivised to sort of BD and go out and do client work. It's really hard to say
time
to
you're
them.
taking away from them, isn't it? And it's hard to incentivise that.
It really, really is. And I think the only way you can do it is to, yes, you can financially incentivise them to be a good mentor and to build it into their bonus structure, but actually it's more just a case of trying to hire nice people who are willing to do it, who care and want to do it. And, for example, our head of fintech is really passionate on this side of things, and she's the kind of person who they all look up to because she will take the time. Even when there's a client screaming to get something done, she'll take the time to sit with them and walk through things. But I think it's really tricky. And, when I speak to partners at bigger law firms, they're all saying there are quite active discussions about chopping their trainee intake and then just hiring laterally. So I think it's going to be really choppy.
There are more routes cropping up on there. Obviously, SQE is a big one that's come around in recent years. I know there's these sort of companies that are popping up where they're acting as the kind of overarching training principle for these places. Like AccuTrain is one that springs to mind. Where they sort of do in-house training contracts, but for multiple places. But then I always feel there's the issue that arises with that from speaking to people from there is that you won't necessarily qualify in 2 years because there's gaps between your seats and things like that, and it's like then it takes you even longer to qualify with like the other, I suppose, education matters that you have to do prior to it. So it seems like
the lateral NQ at the end of it.
Exactly. You still need to be hired somewhere. So I think there's always issues there, but it is quite interesting to hear people talk about when they say, "Oh, we're doing it this way and that way," but there's similar problems kind of across the board.
Yeah, there really are. I mean, AccuTraining are great. Actually, we've not taken someone from them yet, but we've talked to them for a long time. I think their model's actually really good because it also, I mean, the commitment to taking a trainee or even taking someone through the SQE route is you're going to work on them for 2 years. And
then almost gamble on the fact that they're going to stay and have that kind of like clawback from the funding of the SQE in there. Exactly. So it's a 4-year investment a lot of the time. Yeah, and particularly for small, young firms, taking that punt on a junior and saying, we're going to sink a load of cost into this, and there's a risk you won't make the cut. There's a risk you decide you don't want to do law. Let's be honest, there's plenty of people who get halfway through their training contract and think, oh God, what have I done?
And there's also a risk, frankly, that they qualify and they go, that was great, thanks very much, off I go. So it's really hard to take that business decision to say, I'm going to take the leap of faith, I'm going to trust that you're going to be good enough and you're going to stay, and that from a pure business perspective as well, I'm going to have you for an associate long enough for you to sort of pay off the investment. So yeah, I think those non-traditional routes are really helpful, actually.
Yeah, it's nice to have some diversification. I think anything that can be a little bit disruptive is helpful, but I think, like we said, there is issues on all sides.
Yeah, an age-old problem in sales and in recruitment too, especially with hiring juniors, is having good managers and leaders for them. And particularly, a lot of my friends are lawyers when I studied, and they have a quite often complaint of the partner isn't really a manager, or isn't someone who's got their best interests at heart. In the same way in recruitment, you can get someone who bills a load of money but actually really struggles to grow and develop a team. So how do you go about it? You said you're hiring nice people. How do you identify who's going to be able to do that? Is there a bit of trial by fire when someone comes in?
Yeah, there is. I mean, that's the simple answer. I mean, we're actually changing our bonus structure a little bit because we obviously do this profit share piece, and for the senior lawyers, they're incentivised based on how their team does. So, as I was sort of saying earlier, we try and treat people like business people as well. We show them everything. We're very open about the finances as well with everybody, and the senior team sort of see exactly how their team's doing against other teams as well, and they get incentivised based on that. We are tweaking the annual bonus to make it more focused on, 360 feedback. How are your juniors doing? Because I think you do. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a blunt reality. You've got to sometimes coax out good behaviour financially.
No, it's true, true.
But also, I think progression and promotion is now very focused on that. So previously, I'm very, very guilty, particularly in the early days and it's sort of a bit of a running joke of just handing out promotions willy-nilly. I'm very soft. People come to me and say, can I have a promotion? I'm like, yeah, sure. So it's like, and you're promoted, and you're promoted.
You should just say that everyone deserved it who's at founder.
Exactly. Sorry, I should say they're all wonderful.
They're the opposite of Alan Sugar there.
Exactly, yeah. They've all grown into the roles. But, now we've got these sort of pathways, which again makes us sound like really grown up, but it's a thing where you say to people, okay, you want to progress from being an associate to a senior associate. It's not just about getting in good clients and being a really good lawyer. You must be a supervisor. So if you want to progress to senior associate, you have to take on a junior. And there's then, like I said, a lot of incentives around bringing them forward, keeping them progressing, their feedback on you. But we're still small. We're 25 people, so we don't have a training program. We don't have set ways of doing things. You are slightly reliant on people sort of finding their own way, and each person learning from each other. And they do talk a lot, the lawyers, in terms of what works for you, how are you getting the best out of your person. And slowly but surely, we're getting into a bit of a rhythm now, where, I guess you would say, a training program is starting to take shape.
I think it would naturally come to go back to what you said earlier about the different pods. You can kind of have that variety that's there, and you've got more seniors to do it. So it's just nice to see it develop. So we've spoken a lot about sort of founders and how you've been doing it. But obviously, as we touched on, the ALSP market is growing. There are some places I suppose new players cropping up all over the place. How does it feel to sort of be, I suppose, not mimicked, but maybe admired by some other people in the sector?
Just definitely say admired. We definitely got a lot of what I would call frenemies. It's like there's lots of firms who are very similar to us. And I'm also by no means saying we created this model. It was already, we've tweaked an existing model that was out there. I think it's very encouraging because it shows it works. We know it works because we're growing. We do very, very little on the marketing side. We don't do any outbound. This has all been kind of organic inbound, and the firm's still growing really strongly. So it's a vindication of the model, which is lovely. I guess I would make a bit of a distinction between firms like us who are doing this as independent firms and actually a lot of the bigger law firms who are trying to create their own offerings. had a really interesting chat actually with a large US law firm recently, and they were saying that they can't really crack the startup scale-up market because the model that all of the big law firms are employing is that they essentially hemorrhage cash up to about Series C, and they are fully reliant on a big exit event. They basically make all their money on the M&A, and of course, last couple of years in particular, that has been a shocker.
Tough.
So lots of the legal players are actually just saying it's just not worth it. So I think to your point, I actually think, and this is not a pitch, but I actually think a lot of the big law firms should be looking at what firms like us are doing and actually looking at it as potentially a complementary offering. So if you can imagine being a big firm where you're making all your money off the big project work, the big M&A work, and you can't really touch the startup sector, imagine if you had a model like ours where you could actually generate revenue profitably from the off, take them all the way through, and then have your big M&A event at the end. And I think law firms are starting to tune into this now, that there is a way to do it. I won't name drop to law firms by name, but there are a couple out there who are launching offerings that basically look like they've come straight off our website recently. So I think they're waking up to it.
Yeah, there's the launching, also to not name drop any names as well, but the acquiring of existing similar type firms and offerings to founders who are then, they're almost saying, well, we didn't set it up at inception, but we can see the value there now, so let's buy something that's already working and try and integrate that to the firm. One thing that I always sort of see with those is that will that kind of, obviously the corporate like law firm integration, do they then lose the identity of what made them successful to begin with, do you think? Or do you think there is a way to keep a situation where you could have a big US firm with a founders type company on the side, or do you think they'd always end up getting consumed by the larger parent?
Oh god, yeah, so interesting. I mean, I think history probably shows us it's the latter. You end up with this nice, it's like any acquirer, they always start off by saying, oh, we're just going to keep things exactly how they are, and then the
management team's gone and all of that, and it's all changed, isn't it? Yeah,
100%. And I think you end up getting integrated into the main sort of, what do you call it, the Death Star, kind of just sort of drags you in. So I think if this is going to work for big law firms, they would have to treat the founders style offering as being completely separate and discrete. They've got to leave the management team alone, let them carry on doing their thing. There's obviously going to have to be a little bit of integration between the teams in terms of, oh, there's a really tricky, regulatory issue or this, I'll send you to the main firm. But I think there has to be a separation of powers there. Otherwise they end up getting swallowed up and you just become another private practice law firm. They'll almost certainly start tweaking your prices. They'll obviously have a slightly different risk appetite, and you end up just basically becoming an extension of the firm.
That's the thing with the tweaking of the prices. I think it's it's difficult. It's obviously, as you've been saying, so you've got to stay competitive when you're targeting those early stage businesses. And therefore you need the customizable price point to go alongside that.
And you've got to be, the other thing as well is you've got to be super flexible. Like, yes, we have a rate card, but I mean that goes all over the place. We discount it, we bundle things up, we give certain stuff away for free, we do cash equity splits with clients, we do delayed payment for funding rounds. I mean, if you're a big law firm which has risk and compliance and all these, obviously we have all of that, but if you have very set processes and you're not willing to be a little bit flexible with clients, you lose out on a lot because clients just aren't interested in you. So you've got to take each client not as client 3250, but as that particular client, that particular founder, what do they need? And actually, frankly, what are their chances of success? There is also, always a bit of a risk call when you're speaking to a founder. Do we as a firm want to take a risk on them in terms of them paying and them developing? And I think if you're in a big institution, it just becomes more difficult to do that.
Yeah, and I suppose the volume of the clients that they have, there's a less willingness to break away from that rigid model because you've got the luxury to do that, which I think can, in the longer run, actually be a bit of a shot in the foot. Yeah,
it's being boutique. That's one of the benefits. Yeah,
definitely. And you're breaking into a few new areas as well, things like documentation, and the eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed. Do you want to talk us through some of these
through them? Yeah. So here we go. What do you want me to do? A full piece to camera?
I think we should do whilst we're here. Yeah.
All right. So we're a little bit. I think obviously yes, this is of course a complete marketing ploy, but this is we
it
are
definitely works
also,
for us recruiters. Yeah.
I was going to say you're doing all right. What we tried to do as well is we're trying to differentiate, and we differentiate on the legal side. I think we differentiate on the people side in terms of the people we recruit, and also when I said we don't do marketing, we don't do outbound lead gen lists, blasting out emails, but we do like to do this kind of fun stuff. So we actually did an April Fool's joke back in whenever it was 1st of April. It was April Fool's Day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where we said, because we're all a fun socialising team, aka there is, an enjoyment of pub culture.
Yes.
So we basically had this April Fool's joke where we said we thought about the law lots and we decided that as much as we like it, we're actually deciding to go into brewing instead. We're pivoting our business line slightly, and we're going to brewing. And we mocked up like a can of this and said Founders Lager coming soon. And you would think people would know it was April Fool's Day, and some people did, but a lot of people were like, "Mate, awesome! Can I have a can?"
I think I was one of those, to be fair.
were.
So yeah, so maybe that's a reflection of what I know your team culture is. Yeah, it took nearly a year, but here we are.
So it was, and it got such a load of sort of energy and volume around it, and we got so much inbound in terms of people saying, "Oh, can you send me some?" that we thought, let's just do it.
Yeah.
So our Christmas hampers this year, we have Founders Lager. All of these, by the way, were team generated. None of this was ChatGPT. This was legit legal inspiration. So we've got the Founders Lager. I think I meant to say it's like Czech hops with like a clean finish. Then you've got the NDA, which is no damn alcohol. So that's our
Very
non-alcoholic
good.
version.
Very good.
Which actually weirdly is my favourite. It's really, really nice. And then we've got the IPA, intellectual property, which actually weird is my least favourite because I love IPA. But they're good fun. We also did Legal Grounds coffee. We have a client who does hot sauce, so he did Legal Lava for us, and it all got bundled up and sent to clients. We just got a lot of love for it. So yeah, we've just got to try and find a way next year to up the ante.
Nice.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that, Tom. It's been great to have you. Really appreciate your time, and looking forward to seeing what's in the Christmas hampers next year.
Oh yes, well, great working with you both. Thanks for your help.
Thanks, Tom. Cheers.
Nice.